A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hello, Herman and Corn. It's me, the human who used to send in these audio prompts. You remember me. The last number of episodes we've used our new text generation MCP. I type in a prompt and we use an internal MCP server in order to generate the pipeline from a text prompt, so which is why there's no audio prompt. I have to say I actually much prefer the recording these prompts, and it's kind of an important part of the podcast for me, is I really wanted it to not be fully AI, and that there'd be me, literally my unedited prompts. And I've thought about doing some editing to kind of make me sound more polished and clean out the ums and the pauses. And I might do that down the line just for the pleasantness of our listeners, but I kind of wanted it to be this raw stream of conscious that then gets answered. So it was a very deliberate choice, and most episodes will continue to be produced with my voice, but sometimes it's text. And as I mentioned, it's a internal MCP. We're an AI first podcast, this whole amazing experiment called My Word Prompts, that I have to say, it's these little AI ventures that I do on my own initiative. As much as I work with AI professionally, it's often these projects that I learn the most from, because I have, it's the stakes are a bit less when it's something you're doing purely for your own enjoyment and not for a profit motive and not for work. And I often learn the techniques and prompt engineering that I actually bleed into my commercial work. This isn't a pitch to hire me, but if you do want to hire me, go ahead and hire me. dsrholdings.cloud, or just look at my website, danielrosel.com. You mentioned something in that podcast actually about me that I challenge you to see what you could find about me online. You said that I am into privacy 100%, but I'm also very public and open source. And you mentioned that as being a paradox. I have to say, I never even thought about that. That really got me interested. I do absolutely build in public, and I think it's born from a few things. Firstly, genuine desire to help others. I love the idea of an open source knowledge economy, that if you figure something out, and that's actually how I started taking documentation seriously. It actually was the wellspring, or where my YouTubing career started, was literally creating these screen shares for my own reference. So I began documenting things because they were complicated and I knew I'd forget them. And from creating my own documentation, I thought, 1 second, I don't need to gate this. Let's just put it up on a YouTube channel and anyone can figure it out. And I guess I really I don't believe in karma. I'm Jewish, as you know, and I ascribe to our own religious traditions. But in the most general sense, that helping other people, if there's no need to gate information, we all have to make a living. A little bit of information sometimes has to be kept back in order to, for competitive reasons, but to the very fullest extent possible, I do open source. And I don't worry tremendously about privacy, because I guess I take the view that when we're talking about digital breadcrumbs, we're talking about sort of metadata and all that stuff, I don't think you can really be anonymous on the internet anymore. So I'm very careful about doing things. I never post my live location with a photo of my kid or something ridiculous like that. But I did that whole shenanigans a while back of trying to be like an online ghost, or being super careful, not even having a profile photo on Facebook. And personally, there is much more benefit. And I guess that our best defense against the misuse of technology and deepfakes is being transparent, because it makes it, as we've talked about in our episodes about legends in the context of intelligence agencies, it makes it actually way harder for people to misuse technology if the real people are more real, and that sets the bar much higher, so it's harder to hack that information. I think that provides a good springboard actually into what I'd love to actually ask in today's episode. See, when I ask these audio prompts, you get the prompt and you get the random context and musings all in one. It's a combined package that you don't get with the text prompt yet. But my prompt today is regarding best practices in information security. I was in the hospital recently, routine, and I saw there was a big shredding thing, one of those bins for collecting pieces of paper, and it said, information security, send all, this was in Hebrew, put all information with credentials here. And it actually impressed me because I've noticed in visiting health funds in Israel that people are often crazy sloppy about that. Like, you'll go up to the person at the front desk and she'll say, please give me your ID number, and she's reading it so everyone in the room can hear, and reading your medical conditions, and you're like, please be a bit quiet. Or she's putting someone's medical scan for everyone to see on the counter. And so I always thought there was kind of a culture of, I have to say, a bit sloppiness here in that regard. So it was actually comforting to see, or nice to see, and that there was some awareness of it. And when we talk about information security, I'd love to actually talk about the things we as consumers should be doing. So I have to say, I haven't had a good track record with shredders. Maybe I didn't buy a good one, but they kept jamming, and the company who repairs them said, yes, it's in warranty. You'll just have to bring it physically to us somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And I never bothered. So I've ended up reverting to crude methods like the scissors, the reliable scissors, and what else do I do? And then these privacy rollers you'll see on AliExpress, and they literally just roll zeros and ones or some Chinese characters over documents. And I do it for, I try to minimize my use of paper, as I mentioned, for environmental reasons. But if there's any paper that I've had to keep with maybe medical stuff on it, I'll do one of those approaches before putting it in the trash bag. But I guess I always wonder, how far is it prudent to go? For example, if we get stuff delivered from Amazon or from the internet, before we throw out the box, should we be going over the address label? Most people, including me, are not going to be the subject of any kind of, deliberate attempts to undermine our privacy. So I guess I'd love to get from you, Herman and Corny. We've talked about the digital world and privacy a lot. Let's talk about the real world, or the physical world, here for a second. The world of scanners, the world of shredders, and what would you recommend as a baseline series of best practices for someone who wanted to be prudent but not paranoid or over the top about this kind of thing? Over to you two.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to my weird prompts. We are coming to you as always from our home here in Jerusalem, and I have to say, it feels like we are really getting back into the proper groove today. I am joined by my brother, as always.
Herman Poppleberry here, at your service. And Corn, I am so glad we are listening to an actual audio recording from our housemate Daniel today. I know he was experimenting with that text generation tool, the MCP, for a while, but there is just something about the raw, stream of consciousness feel of his voice that sets the right tone for our discussions. It feels more personal, like we are actually sitting around the kitchen table together.
And Daniel touched on something right at the start of his prompt that I think is worth reflecting on for a second. He mentioned that this whole project, My Word Prompts, is about enjoyment rather than profit. In a world where everything is monetized and every hobby has to be a side hustle, just doing something because it is intellectually stimulating and fun is its own kind of radical act. It is a breath of fresh air in an economy that tries to squeeze every drop of productivity out of our creative impulses.
It really is, and it ties into his broader philosophy of radical transparency. We have poked fun at him before for being so open source with his life, but he makes a compelling case. If you assume that anonymity is dead, then being your most authentic, documented self is a form of defense. It is much harder to deepfake someone who has thousands of hours of real footage and documentation out there. It creates a high bar for any imposter to clear. If you have already shared your reference screen shares on YouTube and documented your thought process, a fake version of you has to be incredibly sophisticated to pass the sniff test.
It is a fascinating paradox. But today, Daniel is shifting gears from the digital cloud down to the physical dirt, so to speak. He was at a hospital recently and noticed those heavy-duty shredding bins, and it got him thinking about how sloppy we are with our physical information. He is asking about the baseline for physical information security, or InfoSec, for the average person. He has had bad luck with shredders. He is using scissors and privacy rollers, and he wants to know where the line is between being prudent and being paranoid.
This is right up my alley. I have been waiting for an excuse to talk about the mechanics of document destruction. People think that because we live in a digital age, paper does not matter anymore, but that is a dangerous misconception. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, reported in their latest data that physical mail theft remains a primary vector for what they call new account fraud. That is when someone opens a completely new credit line or utility account in your name using information they found in your trash or your mailbox. Even in 2026, the physical mailbox is still the front door to your financial life.
That is a great point to start with. Most people worry about their passwords being leaked in a database breach, which is legitimate, but they forget that a discarded bank statement or even a medical bill is a goldmine for a social engineer. So, Herman, let us look at Daniel's current setup. He has given up on consumer shredders because they keep jamming, and he is using scissors and those privacy rollers you see on those import websites. Is that enough? Or is he just engaging in security theater?
Well, it depends on what you are trying to hide and who you are hiding it from. Let us talk about the failure of consumer shredders first, because that is a very common frustration. Most people go to a big box store and buy a cheap strip cut or basic cross-cut shredder for $50. These are usually rated at what we call DIN P2 or P3 levels. For those who do not know, the DIN 66399 standard is the international benchmark for paper destruction. A P2 shredder just makes long strips. If you have ever seen a spy movie where they piece together documents, they are usually dealing with strip-cut paper. It is actually quite easy to reconstruct with modern software.
I remember we touched on that back in episode 564, when we talked about erasing data. The physical world has its own version of a factory reset, and it is a lot harder to achieve than people think. If the strips are wide enough, a simple optical character recognition tool, or OCR, can read the text across the strips without even needing to perfectly align them.
Back in 2011, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, held a shredder challenge. They shredded 5 documents into over 10,000 pieces and offered a $50,000 prize to whoever could reconstruct them. A small team won it using custom algorithms that matched the paper's grain, the ink patterns, and the shapes of the shreds. Now, that was over a decade ago. Imagine what a modern generative AI model could do with a scan of your trash. If the particles are large, the puzzle is trivial for a computer.
So the reason Daniel's shredders were jamming is likely because they were underpowered for the volume of mail people get these days. Cheap shredders have plastic gears and small motors that overheat after 3 minutes of use. They have a very low duty cycle, but the real issue is the particle size. If you want to be prudent, you need to look at DIN P4 or P5. That is what we call microcut. Instead of strips or large confetti, a P4 shredder turns a single sheet of A4 paper into about 400 pieces. A P5 turns it into over 2,000 pieces. At that point, the labor required to reconstruct the document is so high that no identity thief is going to bother with it unless you are a high-value intelligence target.
And that brings us to the privacy rollers Daniel mentioned. These are basically stamps that cover your name and address with a dense pattern of jumbled characters. Are they actually effective? They are a great deterrent, but they are not a vault. The way they work is by confusing the human eye and simple scanners. By overlaying a high contrast pattern of ink over your personal details, you make it very difficult for someone to quickly glance at a box and see your name. However, if someone is determined, they can often use infrared light or high contrast digital photography to see through the top layer of ink.
Wait, how does that work? If I roll black ink over black ink, how can a camera see through it?
It comes down to the chemical composition of the ink. Most printer ink is carbon-based, while many of those privacy rollers use a different pigment or dye. Under an infrared camera, one ink might reflect light while the other absorbs it. It is like the physical version of a redacted document, where the black bars can sometimes be removed in a PDF editor if they were not applied correctly. We see this in forensic science all the time. But for a delivery box sitting in a recycling bin, an infrared camera seems like a lot of work for a thief.
That is the crucial distinction between being prudent and being paranoid. For 99% of people, a privacy roller is perfectly fine for an address label. The goal is to move the thief along to the next person who is sloppy. It is the old joke about the two hikers and the bear. You do not have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the other hiker. If your trash looks like a headache to process, they will move on to the neighbor who threw out their entire tax return in one piece.
Let us talk about those delivery boxes specifically. Daniel asked if we should be obscuring address labels on boxes. I think this is where the prudent versus paranoid line gets interesting. Most people just break down the box and toss it. But that label has your name, your address, and often a barcode or a QR code. What can someone actually do with that?
Well, I would imagine the barcode is the real vulnerability.
You are right. That barcode often contains your customer ID or a tracking number that can be linked back to your account on the retailer's website. If I have your name, address, and a recent tracking number, I can call customer support, pretend to be you, and say I never received the package. I use the info on the box to pass the basic security questions. From there, I might be able to change the email address on the account or get a refund credited to a different card. It is a foot in the door for social engineering.
Plus, there is the second-order effect of consumer mapping. If someone sees 5 boxes from a high-end electronics store and 3 boxes from a luxury clothing brand in your trash every week, they know you're a high-value target for a home burglary or a more sophisticated phishing attack. You're basically advertising your net worth and your buying habits to anyone who walks by the curb. It is like we discussed in episode 778 about the invisible front in modern war. OPSEC, or Operation Security, is all about denying the enemy the little pieces of information that they can use to build a larger picture.
That is a great point, Corn. Physical information security is not just about identity theft, it is about signature reduction. You want to reduce the physical signature of your life. If you leave a trail of breadcrumbs in your trash, you are making it easy for someone to build a profile of you. This is why hospitals use those big gray bins Daniel saw. They are not just being careful, they are legally required to be. Under HIPAA in the United States or similar data protection laws here and in Europe, a medical facility can be fined millions of dollars if patient records are found in a dumpster.
So, if we are establishing a baseline, let us look at the trash audit. If you were to look at your own trash right now, what are the things that absolutely must be destroyed? I would say anything with a signature, anything with a financial account number, and anything with a medical record number. Daniel mentioned the hospital bins, and healthcare is a huge one. Medical identity theft is a nightmare because it can actually mess up your health records. If someone uses your insurance to get a procedure, their blood type or allergies could end up on your file. That is a life-threatening security breach.
It really is. And for a consumer, the baseline should be what I call the 3-tier approach. This is how you stay prudent without spending 4 hours a day at the shredder.
I like that. Break it down for us.
Tier 1 is the high sensitivity stuff. This is your tax documents, bank statements, medical records, and anything with a social security number or government ID. This stuff should never go in the trash hole. If you do not have a micro-cut shredder, this is where you use the scissors to cut the sensitive parts into tiny pieces and then distribute those pieces across different trash bags. Or, better yet, find a local shredding event. Many banks and local governments host them for free. They bring in a massive industrial truck that can pulverize a box of paper in seconds.
And Tier 2.
Tier 2 is the utility bills, credit card offers, and general correspondence. This is where Daniel's privacy roller or a good thick permanent marker comes in. You want to obscure the account numbers and the names. You do not necessarily need to turn the whole thing into dust, but you need to make it unreadable to a casual observer. Those credit card offers are particularly annoying because they often contain a pre-approved code that a thief can use to intercept a new card in your name. I always recommend tearing those in half, at the very least, across the name and the code.
I always find those fascinating because they feel like such a relic of an older era, yet they still show up every day. What about Tier 3?
Tier 3 is the packaging, the junk mail, and the address labels. This is where you just want to remove the link between the object and your home. Peel the label off the Amazon box or use the roller. Once the label is gone, the box is just a box. It is no longer a data point about your life. This is the level where most people get lazy, but it is also the easiest to fix.
I want to push back a little on the environmental side of this, because Daniel mentioned he tries to minimize his use of paper for environmental reasons. Shredding paper actually makes it much harder to recycle. The fibers get cut so short that they lose their structural integrity, and many recycling centers will not accept shredded paper because it clogs their machinery and blows around like snow. So there is a real tension here between being secure and being green.
You are absolutely right, and that is why I think the three-tier approach is actually more environmentally friendly than the shred everything approach. If you only shred the 5% of your mail that is truly sensitive, you can still recycle the other 95%. For the labels on boxes, if you use a privacy roller, the ink is usually compatible with the recycling process. If you peel the label off, you can put the cardboard in the blue bin and just throw the tiny piece of plastic or sticky paper in the trash. It is about being surgical with your destruction.
That is a very sensible middle ground. Now, Herman, I want to talk about the intersection of the physical and the digital. Daniel mentioned he does not worry much about digital privacy because he thinks anonymity is gone. But in my view, physical mail is often the ground truth for digital account recovery. If I want to hack your bank account, one of the first things the bank might ask is for me to verify a recent transaction amount or to send a picture of a utility bill to prove my address. If I have your trash, I have the keys to your digital kingdom.
That is the crucial insight. We call it out-of-band authentication. The digital world relies on the physical world to verify who you are because we still live in physical bodies at physical addresses. If someone steals your physical mail, they can often reset your digital passwords by intercepting the physical PIN codes or using the information on the bills to bypass security questions. This is why a locked mailbox is actually one of the best investments you can make for digital security. It is a physical firewall.
It is funny how the most high-tech problems often have the most low-tech solutions. A sturdy piece of metal with a lock on it can do more for your cybersecurity than a complex password manager in some cases. It reminds me of episode 537, where we talked about the architecture of secrecy and the zero-trust model. In a zero-trust environment, you assume the perimeter is already breached. Applying that to your mail means assuming that once that paper leaves your hand, it is public property unless you have physically altered it.
And let us look at the psychology of this for a second. Daniel is talking about being prudent but not paranoid. Paranoia is when you think everyone is out to get you. Prudence is when you acknowledge that there are opportunistic predators out there and you choose not to be the easiest target. Most identity theft is not a sophisticated operation by a nation state. It is someone looking for an easy score. If you make it just a little bit difficult, they will go somewhere else.
I think that fits perfectly with Daniel's worldview. He is being transparent about his ideas and his work, which builds his brand and his legacy, but he is being prudent about the boring, administrative details of his life that have no value to anyone but a thief. You can be an open book while still keeping your bank account numbers in a safe. Radical transparency does not mean you have to post your medical records on Twitter. It means being open about your knowledge and your process. There's a clear distinction between your public persona and your private PII, or personally identifiable information.
Let us talk about some of the more modern threats that Daniel might not have considered. What about things like NFC tags on products, or even the chips in our credit cards? We talked about NFC longevity in episode 594. Is there a physical security risk to the bits of data embedded in our physical objects?
That is a great question. I have noticed more and more packaging has those little silver coils in them.
Those are RFID or NFC tags. Some high-end clothing and electronics now have them embedded in the packaging for inventory tracking. If you throw those out without disabling them, someone with a high-powered reader could theoretically scan your trash and see exactly what you bought. However, the range on those is very short, usually a few centimeters. The bigger risk is still the paper. Paper is persistent, it is high contrast, and it is easy to process at scale. A thief can photograph 1,000 envelopes in the time it takes to scan one RFID tag.
So, for someone like Daniel, who is living in Jerusalem, are there any specific regional considerations? I know that here we often have different standards for how mail is delivered and how trash is collected compared to the United States.
Well, in many parts of Israel, we have communal trash bins or those large orange recycling cages for paper. This actually makes the risk a bit higher because your trash is sitting in a public space where anyone can walk up and look through it. In a suburban American neighborhood, someone has to walk onto your driveway to get to your bin, which is a much higher social risk for a thief. Here, it is just a guy standing by a dumpster. So, I would say the need for a privacy roller or a small microcut shredder is actually higher here because of that lack of a private buffer zone.
That is a very practical observation. It is all about the threat model. In a dense urban environment, your physical footprint is much more accessible. Now, let us summarize some of the best practices we have discussed for the listeners who want to implement this baseline. Herman, what is the Poppleberry Brothers Guide to Physical InfoSec?
Step 1. Get a locked mailbox if you can. If you live in an apartment, make sure the mail area is secure and do not let mail pile up. Step 2. If you deal with high volumes of sensitive paper, buy a high-quality microcut shredder. Do not go for the $50 special at the supermarket. Look for something with a DINP4 rating or higher. It will have metal gears and a longer run time. Step 3. Get a high-opacity privacy roller for your daily mail and your delivery boxes. It is faster than a shredder for things like envelopes and labels, and it is more environmentally friendly because the paper can still be recycled.
And step 4, I would add, is the mental filter. Before you toss anything, ask yourself, if I saw this in someone else's trash, what could I learn about them? If the answer is their full name, their doctor's name, or how much they owe on their car, it needs to be obscured or destroyed. It is about developing that muscle memory of privacy. It only takes 5 seconds to roll a stamp over a label, but it can save you 500 hours of dealing with a stolen identity.
And do not forget the boxes. Always remove or obscure the labels. And if you have a lot of sensitive documents, consider a professional shredding service once a year. It is surprisingly affordable to take a few boxes to a secure facility and watch them get turned into pulp. It is much better than burning out 3 cheap shredders trying to do it yourself.
I think that is a very solid, prudent baseline. It does not require you to live in a bunker or stop using the internet. It just requires a few seconds of extra effort every day, and it actually supports Daniel's idea of radical transparency. By securing the boring stuff, you free yourself up to be as open and creative as you want to be in the digital space without looking over your shoulder.
It is about building a foundation of security so that you can afford to be bold. If you know your identity is protected, you can take more risks in your work and your public life. It is the same principle as a zero-trust architecture in computing. You assume that the perimeter is breached, so you protect the individual data points. In this case, you assume someone might look at your trash, so you make sure there is nothing there for them to find.
I love how we always find a way to tie this back to the technical principles. It really shows that security is a mindset, not just a set of tools. Whether it is a zero-trust network or a privacy roller on an Amazon box, the logic is the same. Minimize the attack surface and protect the core.
And I have to say, Corn, I am feeling very satisfied with this discussion. It is one of those topics that seems mundane on the surface, but once you dig into the mechanics and the implications, it is actually quite profound. It is about how we interface with the world as physical beings. We are not just digital ghosts, we leave a physical trail wherever we go.
We really do. And I want to thank Daniel for sending this in. It was a great prompt to get us back into the swing of things. I hope he finds a shredder that actually works for him this time, or at least finds peace with his scissors and his rollers. Maybe he should look into those heavy-duty industrial models if he is doing a lot of documentation.
I am sure he will. And hey, if any of you listening have your own weird prompts or questions about the intersection of technology, privacy, and everyday life, we would love to hear from you. You can find us at our website, myweirdprompts.com. There is a contact form there, and you can also find our full archive of over 900 episodes.
Yes, please do reach out. And if you are enjoying the show, a quick review on your podcast app or a rating on Spotify really goes a long way. It helps other curious people find us and keeps this whole project growing. We are not doing this for profit, as Daniel said, but we do it for the community and the conversation.
Well said, brother. I think we have covered the ground today. From DIN standards to infrared ink properties, it has been a journey. It is a reminder that even the most open source life needs a few locked doors.
It certainly has. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on My Weird Prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. We will see you next time.
Stay prudent, everyone.
But not too paranoid. Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts.